I had been watching the door since 11 that morning, not because I was nervous about the ceremony. I'd been through the rehearsal twice, knew every beat, had already cried once in the parking lot just to get it out of my system. I was watching the door because my father had texted at 9:47 a.m. to say he was running a little behind, which in our family's private language meant he was annoyed about something and wanted you to feel it before he arrived. He arrived at 12:14, kissed my cheek, said I looked beautiful, said it the way someone says the traffic wasn't bad, technically positive, immediately forgettable. I told myself it was fine. I'd been telling myself that for 31 years. The ceremony was everything I'd wanted. Daniel held both my hands during the vows, which he wasn't supposed to do. We'd rehearsed it differently, but he reached for them anyway, and that small deviation from the plan was the most honest moment of the entire day. My sister cried. My mother-in-law pressed a tissue to her mouth. Even the officiant, a man I'd met exactly twice, seemed genuinely moved. My father sat in the front row with his arms loosely crossed, not hostile, just present in the way a person is present when they are mostly thinking about something else. I always noticed. The reception was soft and warm in the way late September can be when the weather decides to cooperate. String lights, round tables. A caterer named Patricia, who had checked on me 4 times throughout the day, with the calm efficiency of someone who had seen every variety of wedding day crisis and treated them all with equal unhurried competence. I liked her immediately. We were 40 minutes into dinner when my father stood up. He didn't tap a glass. He just stood the way men of a certain confidence stand when they've already decided the room belongs to them. Someone noticed and went quiet, then someone else. Then the music dropped slightly because the DJ was paying attention. He smiled at the room. Then he looked at Daniel. Then he looked at me. I'll be honest, he said. I wasn't sure about this one. Soft laughter, the kind people offer when they're not sure if they're supposed to. Daniel's a good man, a decent man. He paused in a way that was clearly designed to feel generous. But my daughter could have gone anywhere, done anything. Another pause. I just hope she knows what she settled for. He raised his glass. Some people raised theirs, uncertain. Some didn't move at all. Daniel's hand found mine under the table. His grip was steady and said nothing and said everything. I looked at Patricia, who was standing near the far wall with a clipboard. She met my eyes briefly. Her expression didn't change, but she gave the smallest nod, the kind that means, I see you, keep going. And I held on to that. I smiled. I did not stand. I did not speak. I never touched my cake. What my father didn't know, what he had never once asked about. In 6 years of holidays and phone calls and dinners, where he talked about his own retirement plans with the focused energy of a man who assumed everyone else's finances were simply less interesting, was what I did between 9 and 6 every weekday in a building 12 minutes from our apartment. I'm a financial planner. Have been since I was 26. I passed my exams on the first attempt, built a client base slowly and carefully, and by 30 had a practice that managed more money than my father had earned in the last 15 years of his career combined. I didn't say this to anyone. It wasn't modesty exactly. It was more that his approval had stopped being useful to me somewhere around year 3, and I hadn't found a reason to replace it with his understanding. At his request, 4 years before the wedding, I had quietly taken over management of his retirement account. He'd asked vaguely, the way he asked for most things, assuming competence from whoever was nearby without extending credit for it. I'd said yes, I'd done it well. His account had grown 34% in 3 years. He thought it was just doing what it was doing. He didn't know I was doing it. The morning after the wedding, Daniel made coffee and didn't bring up the toast. That was one of the things I loved about him. He understood that some conversations needed to happen inside a person before they could happen out loud. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time. Then I made one phone call. I transferred management of my father's account to a colleague I trusted, someone thorough and careful who would serve him well. I wrote a short note to accompany the transition paperwork, professional, clean, no editorializing. I said I was managing my caseload and wanted to ensure he received dedicated attention. I did not explain. I did not accuse. I did not wait for him to connect the dots dramatically. In some satisfying confrontation I'd scripted in my head, I just stopped. He called me 3 weeks later, after the paperwork arrived. His voice had a quality I didn't recognize at first, and then I did. It was the sound of a question he didn't know how to ask. You didn't have to do this, he said. I know, I said. A long pause. You were managing it this whole time. Yes. He was quiet for a moment. I didn't fill the silence. I had spent 31 years filling his silences, and I was finished with that particular labor. You did well by it, he said finally. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't enough. But it was the first true thing he'd said to me in longer than I could remember. I know, I said again. I still talk to him. Not often and differently than before. Shorter calls, less accommodation, no more watching the door. Daniel and I are fine. Better than fine, actually. He brought me coffee in bed the morning. I told him the full story. And when I finished, he just said, I married someone remarkable, and your father missed it and then asked if I wanted to go for a walk. We went for a walk. Some things don't resolve into lessons. Some relationships just quietly restructure themselves around what's true, And you learn to live inside that new shape without needing it to look like forgiveness. I don't need my father to understand what I built. I built it anyway.